I wish there was a secret to negotiating, but there isn't. The name of the game is being prepared. You have to be prepared to negotiate. And I have got some slides some overheads I wanted to show you. But I have to tell you, when I was when I was going to college, I went to Washington University in St. Louis, and my background is in business and being a business person and having run subscription agencies. I was the operations vice president of Faxon. I worked for EBSCO. I ran the Midwest for EBSCO. I had my own subscription service. I took it from basically zero sales in the house to over $40 million and then sold it. And I think the timing proved to be was pretty good to sell it, get the heck out of it. Anyways, one of the things that impressed me when I was working for this company in St. Louis, I was the office boy, was the sign they had over the front door which said, "The prepared mind wins out." The prepared mind wins out. So you have to do your homework, and that's extremely important in any negotiations. Knowledge is the key to negotiation. Know what you want. Understanding the researchers, understanding the faculty, understanding the students. It's very, very important that you reach out to these groups and you get an understanding of what they need and what they want. I have to tell you one story. My negotiating skills were exemplified, I suppose, because as the operations vice president of Faxon, I was responsible for all of our data processing and the computer side of the business. And we kept evolving. And what I would do is I would call the salesman in and say to the salesman, okay, can you negotiate? Are you empowered by IBM to negotiate? Well, they're not empowered to negotiate. So I get the sales manager in and say, you guys, because the sales manager wouldn't come in without the salesman, you guys, well, questionable. So then I would go after the regional manager, the regional branch manager, and get him in along with the sales manager and the salesman, and they could negotiate. And here's the process we went through. One thing that we're interested in Faxon was having what they called customer service support, and that meant George Feltz. George was the customer service engineer. He's an MIT graduate. He could play with our computer. We let him in the computer room, and he actually could key in codes into the computer. We let him do that. But we wanted him there at least 2 days a week. And said, okay, now what do you expect in return for his commitment, or your commitment to have him available 2 days a week? And they said, well, we need at least $500,000 points. 500, they call them points or dollars, $500,000 in sales. I said, okay, that equates to disk drives, new computer, what have you. We will commit to doing the $500,000 a year in new business if you'll commit to having George Phelps available to us in our office 2 days a week. They said, sure, no problem. So we had a deal. That's how you go about negotiating. By the way, then they said, well, let's go to Lockovers for dinner. So we went to Lockovers in Boston. They had, lobster dinners, but that's a side point. The negotiation is a process. You really have to be knowledgeable and know what you want and what you expect. And in an academic environment, my academic experience is really limited to Washington University in St. Louis, where I spent 30 years on their library council. And I'll tell you, what's going on in the academic world is really, really difficult. You have so many options available to you today that it's confusing, to say the least. But it's important that you reach out, each and every one of you, reach out to the different departments, to the researchers, to the faculty, and to the students, and find out what their expectations are, what their needs are, where they're going, what they expect from you. It's all available and free on the internet today, but somebody's got to pay for it. See if I can do this without screwing things up too badly. First of all, it's a people world. We're dealing with people all the time. And knowledge is power. And we're looking at problem solving. You want to be a good listener when you're in the negotiating process. You want to ask specific questions, and you want to ask for clarification. You know, it's clear to me as a salesperson, but what's wrong with you? You ask for clarification, you ask for definition. That's very, very important. In negotiating with publishers, we've got a number of publishers here. Here's my publisher negotiating checklist. One of the things you want to find out is what their archiving policy is. What about access? What are the print options? What are the print holdings? Who are authorized users? Am I authorized user as a remote user at Washington University Libraries living in Concord, New Hampshire? Or do I have to live in the St. Louis suburbs to be a authorized user? Does your library belong to a consortium? Do you have consortium membership? Do you have consortium access? All the things that you have to be aware of, and it's just part of the negotiating checklist that you use. You should also prepare the publisher, as I did with IBM. Is the representative, the salesperson, empowered to make changes to the contract? And if you're talking about contracts, there's a legal aspect of negotiating. Do you have to go through the university lawyers in order to get a contract signed? What can we do to reduce our cost? How do we go about reducing it? What do we need from you in your organization to make you successful? That's very important, to determine what's going to make the salesperson successful. You want to be successful, right? Highwire wants to be successful. If I give you additional business, will you consider reducing the cost? Good question. You know, you're going to add more money into the bucket. You know, what's the benefit to us? What can you do to minimize what can we do to minimize our exposure? Ask the questions. Question, question, question. Ask for clarification all along the way. I have to tell you a story about my experience with negotiation. I was up in Maine and decided to go out for dinner. And we went to a little restaurant there that was serving lobsters. The lobsters, you know, that's part of Maine, being, where is the gal from Vermont? That's part of New England, those lobsters. So we're up there, and I said, they had two for, I don't know what they were, $6.95. And that included the French fries and coleslaw and, you know, what you expect to get with a couple lobsters. So smart-ass Buzzy says, well, what about 3 lobsters? How much you going to charge me for that? Instead of 2, I'll have a real fee. He says, well, I don't know. I'll have to go back and ask the owner. So she goes back, and he says, well, he wants $3.95. He wants an additional $3 to be $9.95. I said, well, that's not bad. How about 4? She says, you got to be kidding. I said, no, I'm not kidding. Why don't you go back and 4? So she goes back and comes back about 2 minutes later, 3 minutes later, and says, that'll be $14.95. I said, what? That's $5 for the 4th lobster. That doesn't make sense. She says, yeah, no, you're right. Let me go back and ask him. She goes back and asks him, and he says, that's what it is. That ended the negotiation right then and there. I stopped with 3 lobsters. That was enough. Another story was that you should be aware of is that this couple was on vacation up in Maine, and they went into a grocery store. And the grocery store has hamburger. We all look at hamburger. There's hamburger for $3.95 a pound, and there's hamburger for $5.95 a pound. So the woman calls over the owner and says, well, what's the difference? It looks to me to be the same. You know, it's red, it's got fat in it, what have you. He says, that's $3.95 and that's $5.95. He says, no, I know, I can read that, but what's the difference? He says the difference is that some people like to pay $3.95 and others like to pay $5.95. So if you want to be a $5.95 payer, fine, that's good. You don't ask any questions. But that's my stories. So there's no magic to negotiating your way through this. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over and let Margie tell you some of her stories about how she negotiated and was successful. You ready? You gotta take the mic.
I'm ready.
You ready?
I think I'll turn off this machine. You're going to have it for later. So my name's Margie Love. I'm president of Access Innovations. It's a company I founded ages ago, some 40 years ago. So I've known Buzzy a long time. In fact, Buzzy and I were active together in a couple of associations, the ASIS, American Society for Information Science, which later added and technology, and also the Special Libraries Association. And somewhere along our checkered past, Buzzy was elected division cabinet chair, which represented all the divisions within the Special Libraries Association. And a year later, I was elected division cabinet chair-elect. So, you know, he's a fairly august presence, and I wanted to learn from this man. And I said to him, so what are my duties? And he said, your duty is to get me coffee. Excuse me. Here I'm a young woman, I'm in my suit, I'm ready to be, you know, the powerhouse person, and this dude tells me my job is to get him coffee. So I did. Decaf. I got the coffee. I said, Buzzy, I have your coffee. I walked over, I gave him his coffee. Mr. Bash, your coffee, sir? And everybody knew that I was making a big deal out of it, and they laughed. And the next break, I got him his coffee again. Loudly, ostentatiously, it was the best. It was really the best way to deal with it. So one of the things I encourage you to do as a person in negotiation, probably the number one thing, is keep a sense of humor. This is not a death match. This is not all that important that you have to kill yourself and your reputation over this one contract. You have to be ready to walk away. Let me get to my notes here. I'm a little more modern than Buzzy. So the basics are clear, right? Read the contract. And I don't mean give it to somebody else to read the contract. I mean, you read the contract. I love to give the contract to Jay. That's my favorite thing. But if you don't also read it, you don't have any idea what you're getting into. And the fine print is real important because that's where all the gotchas are. So you have to read the contract and be pretty clear on what it is. The contract usually has 2 or 3 parts to it. One part is the declarations and blah, blah, blah. Second part, so this is a party of the first part of the blah, 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 and we're going to, so this university and that vendor are going to do business. That's the declaration. Second thing is the statement of work, or something that outlines what is the nature of the deal. And the nature deal is really pretty clear, but what it doesn't include is not always so clear. So you need to look for what's missing as well as what's there. I think that's part of those gotchas. And then the third part of the contract is usually the legalese. And that can be fairly extensive, whether it's a service agreement or a purchase order. There's always supporting legalese, and you need to read it. It has to do with how fast you're going to pay or get paid, depending on which side of the fence you're on, and how they can withhold either data or money, depending on whether things are met, whether stipulations are carried out, and so forth. So it's important to read those and understand them. And in our case, we have, I don't know, 80, 100 contracts running for projects at any one time, and they've all gone through legal. So our legal is pretty simple, but the other guy's legal, particularly if it's a university with a law school, seems to take forever. I think they get paid by the pound for the amount of red line that they put in those contracts. And you just need to read those, decide what you're going to be able to accept and what you can't accept. But go ahead and read that contract and then read it again. One of the things, either side of the negotiation, is can they pay? Do they really have the money? I mean, Buzzy talked about whether they have the right to negotiate or not, but do they actually have the money to pay you? Is it their budget, or are they negotiating on behalf of somebody else's budget? When it's somebody else's budget and there's a third party involved, that can get pretty awkward, particularly when you're trying to get paid later. So this is a new project, and it's being grant funded by this granting agency that's been in the papers because the CEO embezzled multi-billions of dollars. And so do they really have the money to give you the grant so that you can negotiate this contract, so that you can pay the vendor, so you can get the materials? You'd be amazed at how often those kinds of things happen. So be sure that the people you're talking to are the ones who can pay. Don't talk to the intermediaries, talk to the ones with the budget. It's also real important to know what you would take. What's your bottom line? What are you willing to agree to, and at what point is it really most sensible to just walk away? There isn't anything you need so badly that it should kill your business, kill your organization, make you be overcharged, have things be under-delivered. You have to know when can I just say, you know, this just isn't going to work for me, and I'm leaving. I don't care if it's on the dating scene or whether it's in a contractual negotiation. You have to know at a gut level when you should walk away. What are you going to take? And if it means that you have to write it down in advance because you get into the passion and the deal, and then you go, oh, just one more thing. You're like a gambler. You have to stop that. You're done. You're out of cash. You spent your allowance. Go home. You don't want to get too emotional in these deals. This is a small business. We are not the huge commercial industries. This information and library and publishing business is pretty small, and people are constantly changing jobs. They work at this university, then they work for that vendor, then they go over to work for some hosting organization, and so people are constantly revolving around. They carry a lot of information with them. They also carry grudges. They have long memories, and they remember when they were dealing with so-and-so, or their friend was dealing with so-and-so at that library. And you don't want to get a reputation in this small business of ours as somebody who's not any fun to deal with. So keep your sense of humor and don't get emotional. Don't make enemies. These people will be on your side in the next edition. One of the things that you might consider is, I don't care. I have a friend that just, I think that's her every other phrase. I don't care. Whatever. It's up to you. And she negotiates the biggest darn deals. It's just amazing to me. And she gets them for a song, but her reaction is always, I don't care. Whatever. They can do it. I don't mind. And it carries really, really well. I can't do it the way she does it, but it is a I don't care, take it or leave it. It's not a bad attitude to have. You do want to be diplomatic. No name calling, no slurs. No, she's a blah, 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 XYZ, as my granddaughter used to call them. And you might study selling techniques, whether you're the one who's doing the selling or whether you're the one who's doing the buying. It's real interesting to know what the selling techniques are. And people have, there are lots of videos on it, there's lots of books on it. And if you're the buyer, you should understand what the selling techniques are. So a good salesman, to my mind, isn't going to say, so you want it, huh? You're going to buy a big car and it's an expensive purchase and you're just not sure and you're wobbling back and forth. They don't say, so do you want the car? They say, do you want the blue one or the red one? and you make a minor choice. It's a small choice. But as you make that choice, you're closer to buying. And then they say, cloth interior or leather? Well, and you think about that. And every question like that, those small questions, lead you to the big sale. So if you study the selling techniques, you'll have a much better idea of what they're suggesting to you, but you can use it the other way around as well. So whether you're on the selling side or the buying side, if you understand the technology and the science, because there is a science to sales of what you're dealing with, then you can move pretty quickly through the process. So if somebody sees you reading one of those how to sell books, it's not a bad thing. And there's a lot of them that are just basically bullet points, but they're very, very helpful. I particularly like Lee DuBois myself, but you can read whoever you want. Lee DuBois. Let's see, what else have I got here? The customer is not always right. Excuse me, but the customer is not always right. They don't know sod all about what it takes you to build this product. But they are the customer. So I will say the customer is always the customer, but I will not agree that the customer is always right. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to go over a quick thumbnail of what it takes to build a digital project, because that's an important part of your understanding of what it is they're trying to sell. If you can, you should let the other guy make the first offer. Get a stake in the ground, get an understanding of what the deal is, what are the parameters, what's a ballpark figure. You don't need an exact figure because you haven't gotten to the exact nature of what all you're doing, but get a good idea of what the parameters of the deal are, and let them make the first offer. And of course, get it all in writing, everything in writing, because if it's not in writing, you didn't buy it. I'm sorry, but you didn't write it down, it wasn't part of your deal. I don't see that in the contract. And remember that it might be you and someone else negotiating the contract. It's a completely different set of people who are going to do the implementation. And they weren't there when you were doing the negotiation, so they don't know what you talked about. They don't know all the side stuff that you bantered about and that you kind of agreed to. You didn't write it down, it's not in the contract, it's not going to happen. So you need to have lots of examples, lots of specifications, lots of details in what it is you're buying or what they're selling. Because if it wasn't there, how is your colleague going to know what they're supposed to get? And how is the project manager on the vendor side supposed to know what they're supposed to deliver? It wasn't in the contract. I'm sorry, those people left the company and went to work for somebody else. You won't know, so get it in writing. Appeasement doesn't work. If you think, well, I could do a little more for you, I could get there, I could move it forward, and all that shows is that you're weak and they can keep on pushing for a better deal. So don't try any appeasement in your negotiation process. You are negotiating every single day. When you go to order at a restaurant, you are negotiating what it is you're going to get for your food. Did you want fries with that? Do you want that medium rare? What temperature do you want your hamburger? Do you want the coleslaw, or do you want the squash, or do you want the salad? What do you want? Every one of those is a negotiation back and forth. And you can get an excellent meal if you negotiate for it well, like Buzzy's 3 lobsters. He couldn't have eaten 4 in the first place. He was just testing them. So you do need to keep track of what hat you're wearing. So one of the things for more than half of the people in the room is they're women. And you're negotiating often in a man's world. Fortunately, in library and publishing, there's a lot of women. But remember that you don't have to be one of the guys. When I worked at NASA, I was an engineer. I was the only female engineer. I was the only female manager. And I went to coffee with the guys twice a day. And I didn't become one of the guys, but I did help them girl watch. I could point out particularly good specimens to them, and they appreciated it. So it was kind of one of those when in Rome kinds of things. You can be part of the group and not be exactly like them. And I think it's important to keep that perspective. All right, let's see, what else do I have? Anything else? Yeah, I think that's good enough. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in my few minutes, yep, I'm good, right? Was what it takes to build the digital product. So there's been a lot of this, well, if it's electronic, it must be free. It's just bits and bytes. It's in the ozone. It's digital, therefore it's free. And you know what? It costs a lot to get that data into that digital format. What we've been doing is first you got to gather all the data, and it takes a lot of double checking to make sure that all the data that you thought you were supposed to get is actually there. So you need to do an inventory to make sure that the data you thought you were going to deliver or you thought you were going to receive is actually the data that was expected. So you need to do a count, you need to watch the logs, you need to be sure that all that data is there. And when that data is all collected, then in order to make it usable in a library environment, or a digital environment, a website or whatever, you need to be able to search it, for example. You want to look for something in it. You don't want to just have a big pool of digital stuff over here that you have to string search. You want to enhance the metadata. You want to have author, you want to have title, you want to have subject headings. And all those things need to be added individually. They just come in a big blob in a digital file, particularly if the file has been OCR'd. So I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, we have at our university library digitized 11 million pages. I said, wow, what is that, like the new microfilm? It's just thrown in there, and how do you get it back out again? How do you search that stuff? She said, well, we OCR'd it. I said, oh, how good's your OCR? Well, it's OCR'd, so it's probably good, right? I said, did you OCR it from digital files? No, it's old newspapers and writings from senators' papers and so on. Well, so how do you know how good that OCR is? And we've built a dictionary of 750,000 words, which is more than Webster's unabridged, to test against OCR. Well, her OCR had 5% readable words against the 750,000 word dictionary, 5%. The computer can't read that, I'm sorry. So in order for that OCR data to get cleaned up, we had to run it against 3 different OCR packages. Then we merged the results into one big data file. And from that data file, we were able to get 40% readable words, which is still not a huge amount. But it was good enough that we could index the data files and create a metadata record for the library. That's just one step. Then we need to pull out the entities, the geographic locations. We want to be able to say, this is the first author, this is the second author, this is the title, this is the topic, and all those things need to be parsed into something that if I just gave you the readable page, it wouldn't matter if the document was from the 1600s or from last week, you'd be able to read it, but that's not true in the digital file. So there's a tremendous amount of stuff that goes on in creating those digital files and making them searchable. After you've collected all the data and you've made it into a regular searchable format, or readable format for the computer, then you need to load it into some kind of a software package that'll make it available to the users, some kind of a platform, an OPAC or a journal platform or whatever. And then on top of that, different users get different rights. If they're a subscriber, they get one kind of rights. If they're a member of the library, they get another kind of rights. If they're the general public, they can maybe only see the title or maybe only see the title and the abstract. And keeping track of all those rights and permissions is not a trivial task. People get real annoyed when they don't have their permissions properly stated, as you probably all have the lashes to see that. So there's a lot that goes into the creation of a digital project. I teach an all-day workshop on it, so I'm not going to do that to you today. But be aware that digital is not free. In many cases, it's much more expensive to create than the paper product was. So I think that's it. Buzzy, any questions?
That's my understanding. They have the PhD from the University of Washington.
Now, Buzzy, this is a matter of negotiation. He just sat next to me and said, "You're going to say something, aren't you?" I said, "I am." So, oh, yeah, Jay Van Heeman, CEO of Access Innovations, and as Margie said, she founded the company more than 4 decades ago, and I've been there all of that time. I like the way Buzzy started this afternoon's session by passing around the mic with the question, "Why are you here?" That's a very good question. And that's the first question you should ask when you sit down. Let's say you sit down with Steve from Highwire Press. God forbid he takes you into a room with no windows and closes the door, right? Puts you on the other side of the paper. What's that?
I've only done that
Once, yeah. And you should ask yourself, why am I here? Why am I here? And then the whole series of questions that he put up on the slides there. What is the purpose? Often negotiations, you think, are all about price. Rarely are negotiations about price. It's about value, and that's what you should think about. What value are you getting? What value do you need to deliver to your institution? So there's two sides to the value. What value are they providing? And what value do you need to deliver? And how can you leverage that? So, we are living in, as the saying goes, in interesting times. We have in office now, in the White House, a person who will probably go down as one of the greatest presidents of all time. I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands, but I think the vast majority of people in here had an emotional reaction to that comment. And that was done deliberately. I'm not saying I believe that, I don't, but you had an emotional reaction. So what have I asked you? This side of the room is going to debate that proposition on the positive. This side is going to debate that issue on the negative. No, he isn't. Yes, he is. Just like in high school and debate class. How would you feel about that if you were on the side you didn't want to be on? Very difficult. Negotiations is a very emotional process, particularly when you get down to the nitty-gritty and you've been at it a while. It's very emotional, just like the kind of emotion that a comment like I made, a political comment I made, a hot topic comment, kind of raises your blood pressure. You feel a little heat coming up in your face. It is an emotional process. So as Buzzy said, to reinforce one of his things, be prepared. Because when you're prepared, you're not going to get as much an emotional reaction that clouds your vision and your judgment. If you're prepared, you know what you want to get, what you're trying to accomplish. So think about that. Yes, sir.
If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me expand on that a little
Yeah.
bit. So when you're negotiating for subscriptions, usually the discussion is about price. Today, it seems like the discussion is much more about open access, new models, trying to figure out what the library, what the universities, what the researchers want, what the publishers can do. And more than a negotiation, it seems like it needs to be a collaboration, but I haven't heard that term used at all today, so I'm a little confused.
No, you're not, you're not confused. It should be a collaboration. I mean, we all talk about win-win. It should be a win-win. It should be a collaboration. And yes, you're trying to solve some problems. Maybe you don't know what the solution is going into the discussion. You talked about, well, we don't know what the package should be. You know, we don't know what we could leave out. Let's say if you're trying to negotiate a bundle of journal titles. And on one of his buzzy slides is, you know, what kind of access do we have? I mean, is it digital? Is it paper? Is it both? Yeah, what about open access? Well, if it's an open access journal, is that in the bundle? Am I paying for that? Can't I just open up my site? So that gets back to my comment about, let's stand over here and I can see. That gets to my comment about value. You know, what value do you need to get? What value do you need to deliver to your users? And it's extremely complex, and so you're right, sometimes you go and you don't know. So what you need to do when you make an appointment with a vendor, or a vendor wants to talk to you, is to make clear that in the first couple of meetings, it truly is exploratory. You may not have a budget. Most of the vendors in this room here are aware that large institutions, both public and private, have budget cycles. So what's your fiscal year? Where are you in the budget? Do you have the money? Say, well, no, I don't. I'm trying to put it together. I have to have my budget in by the end of the calendar year or something like that. So I have a number of problems to solve. You know, where do you fit in the equation? So yes, it's a collaborative effort. It should be. The vendor's trying to help solve some problems. They can't solve your problems if they don't know what they are. I mean, just because you're a vendor of a collection of journal titles, of serials, and you have a bundle, doesn't mean you know what they want or that you have the solution for them. Maybe you need it delivered in a certain way, a certain fashion. You need to have certain rights, or you can't give up certain things. I mean, one of the common things I get involved with in negotiations, it seems like a simple thing, but it's venue. The contract or the license or the agreement has this contract, if there's any issues, gets adjudicated in the state of New York or something like that. Venue. Well, most state institutions, it's against the law for the University of New Mexico to have a venue that isn't in New Mexico. As a vendor, you can't negotiate that. So what's your alternative? Well, one alternative sometimes they'll buy into is no jurisdiction at all. So you have to come around to what are the limitations. Again, budget isn't, or price always seems like the big issue, but it rarely is. I've said that earlier, I'll repeat it. It's value. If you're getting enough out of it that you can deliver enough. What sort of metrics? Now this has gotten to be a lot more popular, and I'm sure if you run into this, is what sort of metrics can the publisher or the aggregator provide you that you can feed back to show value? Do they keep track of enough pieces of information about usage, etc.? You talk to Steve from Highwire Press. Can you keep track of the volume, of where the interest is? Is there a narrower focus than we think? Can we cut out things in terms of what's on the Highwire platform that you're getting from the journals that are in their discovery platforms that are out there? So what can you, metrics can you get? The more metrics you can get, the easier it is to try to provide a measurement of value, of what value you're providing, and making it easier for you to get the budget you need to acquire those resources. Yes?
Allowing in this case with the university, to put up their logo so that when the journal comes up, it'll show the logo of the university so that the end user knows that they're the libraries in effect paying for the material.
Okay, yeah, for those who didn't quite hear that, is to get a vendor to put up your logo to see, to get some visibility. I was at an interesting presentation, the one before this, before lunch, by Judy Russell, the Dean of Libraries at the University of Florida, who's done a wonderful project with Bibliolabs, which is a local company here in Charleston, in conjunction with Barnes & Noble and Amazon, of putting up the university's theses and dissertations in a print-on-demand scenario. And they do put in the information, if you find a thesis or a dissertation searching Amazon on a particular topic, and it happens to be in this product with Bibliolabs, it does state that University of Florida. So they get some attribution. It also says that you can get, it's in their collection. So if you have access to the libraries there, or friends of the library, or a student, you can go in and get it for free. You don't need to pay the print. It's a very wonderful model. If you get a chance, if you know Judy Russell, or get a chance to talk with her, or the folks at Bibliolabs here, it's a very interesting product, and it gets much wider distribution of that content outside of the particular library, and even outside of UMI. That it gives the exposure for the authors, for the PhD students, and they all want some, develop a reputation. That's how they get a job. We're looking at a little bit before 3. Do we have questions for Margie or Buzzy at this point? Yeah, we got over here, and I'll come over, and so you can hear what he's asking or comment he's making.
The question I have probably is more attuned to all of you, is the librarians are the ones we deal with to make the purchase, but the librarians are not the ones that use the journals. That's used by the faculty. How do you bridge that gap between the librarians and the faculty? Because a lot of times we think sometimes the book or the journal is bought by the librarians, but the faculty doesn't know about it. How do you bridge that gap?
There are, of course, a lot of techniques for doing that, not the least of which is the discovery platforms, to get out there, and then the metrics that measure who's using it. There's, a student, is it a, what level? Undergraduate, graduate, advanced. So there are some metrics on some of the discovery platforms and the OPACs that where the, when you have a license and the materials is how it's used. There could be perhaps other additional solutions.
There are updates to the library statistics standards, like Counter and other things like that, that provide basic information and guidelines on how to collect information on usage, and the idea is that usage is the best indicator of how much people like or don't like a particular resource, and those play heavily into repurchasing, or the next time you're going to buy stuff, you want to see how well you did last time. Journals for miscellaneous reasons are very much into the impact factor, which is a somewhat subjective measure of how good the journal is, and we'll see how it holds up over this next few years in the light of Plan S and open access and other things that are changing the model that we currently operate under. Yeah, they're changing. Yes, they're rapidly changing the entire publishing map. I also think, do I have time for Screed?
Okay, yes, I'll give you.
I also think that open access is going to spell the death of libraries, and if anybody wants to talk to me about that in detail, I'd be happy to do that, because in asking that all the valuable resources that they've bought and curated over many, many years be open access and free and available without any embargo as soon as possible, it doesn't just upend the publishing model, it upends the model for libraries, because libraries are modeled on buying, selecting, curating, collecting some very, very valuable resources. And if those resources have zero value because they're all free, then why do we need the library? And if you look at a lot of libraries now, they're converting their stacks, because the stacks are digital, into event spaces and coffee shops and other things. And I'm going, that's really valuable resource, real estate, and it's usually right in the middle of campus, and it's going to be swiped by somebody in the administration, because all you're doing is making it available digitally. That said, there are some libraries that have been born digital, like the National Transportation Library has 3 cubicles, and that's it. And they do everything that way, but it's a completely different model. So we need to start thinking about the new models with open access, Plan S, GDPR, et cetera.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you both. I just wanted to interject. Can you hear me now? I guess I can. I have the opportunity to go to Europe once a year. Well, I won't go more than once a year, but I go to a conference over in Europe once a year. And it's fascinating to me to hear the differences between the European library community and the U.S. library community on open access. As far as the Europeans are concerned, everything should be available and for free. Whereas in the United States, somebody's got to pay for it. We just haven't figured out who yet. But the other point is, what I learned here was about that access that the publishers here should be aware of, is making sure that the library's name gets on their screen or is displayed when somebody accesses an article or a journal. I think that's very, very important. And the libraries, certainly libraries in the United States, can use as much PR as possible. They should get every little bit. That's something you can do. As far as negotiating is concerned, I want to go back to the basics. It's a people world. It's not a computer world. It's a people world. Remember that. And you're part of the people, and you do the negotiations. And the prepared mind's going to win out. So what you want to do is make sure that you know you've talked to the selectors, you've talked to the researchers, you've talked with the students and faculty, and you find out what they need, what they're thinking, and you're going to get all sorts of, the variety of answers you're going to get is all over the board. But at least you've talked with them and you got a sense of what's going on out there. And that's very, very important to know what your users need. You're a problem solver. And remember that knowledge is very, very powerful today and will continue to be. Make sure that you're a good listener. Give the vendor the opportunity to explain their point of view, listen to what he or she has to say and how they're saying it and what they have to say. And remember to ask specific questions, very, very specific. You want clarification. Clarification is extremely important to you and to the salesperson that you ask, and there's no dumb questions. Ask lots of questions, and lots of success to you. I think you'll do very well. Questions? Questions? No questions? I understand that there's a break now, and that we're all eligible to pick up some cookies, some drinks, what have you, and they're going to be served outside this room here. So you're welcome to join in the festivities.
Thank you.
Thank you.